because I know he holds a future, and life was worth the living just because he lives.
I'm Donna Birch, the daughter of Bernard Swanson, one of the founders of Living Springs. Our family attended the first camp and lived in a small umbrella tent. That year, a wood structure was built as a kitchen, but the dining area was a tarp extended over long tables and benches. Chapels were in a large tent with uncomfortable benches.
Well, in terms of the camp, I was an original camper the year the camp started, 1947. My dad and Howard Pearson's dad, Ernest Pearson, helped locate the site, the old site for the camp. And I was at the camp from the first year.
I was at that first camp in my mother's arms as a very young 6-month-old child.
So one of the earliest or best memories that I've had at camp was probably Danny Johnson and his skits. Either he would be falling down or jumping off of Boot Hill, or covering himself in fire retardant and falling into the campfire. Those were crazy times. Box hockey was always fun. Softball, I remember the old guys always being able to hit the ball into the lake for a home run. I think everybody remembers Les Smith and his friend Andy.
My earliest memory of camp is I got chickenpox halfway through the week, and so I had to go home, and I was really sad, super disappointed that I couldn't stay for the rest of the time. I didn't want to miss any time down there.
One first memory at camp is actually Landon Loy, the reason I came to camp in the first place. And Landon decided that it would be a good idea to roll down the old Boot Hill in a 45-gallon drum. And he wrapped a towel around his head to keep himself safe, somehow thinking that would also be a good idea. He rolled down the edge, off the edge of Boot Hill, was cooking so fast and nailed a tree.
For me, camp was something that was my summer every summer for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, my mom was a nurse down there, and I was just a little camp rat running around. And so for me, it started pretty early. I gave my life to the Lord down at Living Springs at the old camp property up on the hill. I think I was 5 or 6. Yeah, that's one of my first camp memories.
When we were asked to come, it was to be as sports director. But somehow that included leading all the music with Donna at the piano, dividing campers into teams for various activities, washing dishes and sports. I went to Farintosh to pick up the groceries for the camp, going to nearby farms for eggs, milk, and potatoes, and I used the honey wagon to pump the sewer.
I had the privilege of experiencing Living Springs Bible Camp for the very first time the summer of 1996, I think it was. I was invited to come as a speaker for senior teen camp. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I remember as I was driving to camp praying and saying, God, would you just move in students' hearts this week? And boy, did he move. There was a phenomenal move of God. A number of kids accepted Jesus that are still following him and still connected with camp all of these years later.
And one of my more nostalgic memories from the old property would be just playing Ultimate Frisbee in a storm in tons of mud, getting covered and never really being able to get clean because there was never hot water, so it was cold hose showers, and yeah, everyone just didn't smell great, but it was so fun. There was nothing like it. And then of course just meeting Jeff down there and getting to work alongside him for so many years.
Particularly in the old property that I think of the dining hall, so many great times and so many great times of fellowship and growth. I think of, though, probably at the top of the list for me would be the deck in front of the chapel. Man, I remember great times connecting with the staff there during chill and fill, but also in the afternoons being able to chat with people and connect with them there. I remember some great steak that John Dick made for us, eating it there and just fellowshipping and connecting with with campers there as well.
And that would be the place we call Boot Hill. And it's significant for a number of reasons. One is that we worship there. Also, it's a place where I committed my life to the Lord more than once. To me, it's kind of like a pile of rocks. Like when Jesus told Moses and Aaron to build piles of rocks to remember things. Boot Hill is one of those places. It's the place where I decided that it was the right thing to do to ask Lori to marry me. It's a place that I went to when I had major concerns about the drought we experienced in 2002 and the way it was affecting our camp and our families and our farms. It's also a place where I've gone to grieve for loved friends that have finished their work here and gone on to be with the Lord.
Well, I'd have to say it's the old Sawdust Trail. Now, many of you here probably don't know what the old Sawdust Trail was, but in those initial years, we didn't have a beautiful building like you have now to meet in. Our way of meeting was in I believe it was a big old army tent that they'd spread freshly made sawdust on the floor, and that was our tabernacle. So the old Sawdust Trail for me was, I believe I got saved there 6 or 7 times. Then my cousin Ron Swanson, he's my oldest cousin on my mother's side, he set me aside and he said, you know, Paul, you don't have to go down the trail 6 or 7 times to be saved. He said, you're saved once and for all. He says, some of those other trips down there is just to straighten up the old guy that you were. He said it was a reconstruction walk. It wasn't a saving walk.
In the early days of the camp, we brought in some pretty big names for our family camp. When the Jans Quartet was there, at least in one of their times, they had daily radio broadcasts, and they would do the radio broadcasts right from the camp. So we as campers were all part of that wonderful experience because it was all technically the highest thing you had going at that time, okay?
Right around the age of 8, I can clearly remember sitting on the log that used to lay across in front of the doors of the old army cabins that were there. Myself and I think there was a couple other boys too that made our way out to this log, and as our counselor explained the gospel again to us, we were able to commit our life to Christ.
The thing that comes to my mind is the people. Always the people. There's lots of other memories, but the probably the most nostalgic part is the people that have been involved in our camp.
For me, it was always driving down there and coming over the hill and seeing the lake for the first time every year. That was always something that gave me chills. And just even the smell of the old cabins, even now when I go into them, it just takes me back to being a kid. And that screen door slamming at the back of the old dining hall, and James Teeson's size 12s running away on the gravel because he did something to somebody.
Say, and in who I am.
And in terms of who I am, I'm the father of Gerald Swanson, known as Gumby. And at the old camp, there was a piece of property across the lake that was known as Gumby Island.